Hello, JBF. Hope everyone is doing good and not losing hope amid this season of uncertainty. I'm actually quite honored to have been asked to lead a devotional this week. I've really appreciated what the other guys have shared recently, and I hope that I can share something with you that you will find valuable in your walk with Christ. Now, I still feel very new to JBF. And most of you might not know my wife and I very well, but I hope that changes soon as we get to know each other and you get to know us. So one of the things you may not know about me is I love talking, reading, discussing, and listening to people engage in apologetic issues. In fact, if I was given a choice between going to an apologetics conference or a worship seminar, I would probably choose the apologetics each time. I love worship music, but not as much as learning about how I can better defend my faith. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, apologetics is what we're talking about. It comes from the Greek word called apologia, which means to give a defense. And that's kind of where we get our proof text in 1 Peter 3:15. It says this. It says, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect." Today I want to share something that I learned a few years ago that has helped give me confidence when facing a discussion that challenges your faith. This technique can help you with those awkward moments you might have with non-believers when you just don't know what to say. So let me set this scenario up for you. You're with friends or family or co-workers, and somehow the question of God is brought up. Maybe one person boldly states, "I don't believe God exists." Now, what do you do in that situation? Do you try to redirect the conversation to something more pleasant? Maybe talk about the weather or something more neutral? Or do you get in an argument and tell the person how they're wrong? Maybe you have a few things in your back pocket that you've used in the past to defend God's existence. What do you think you should do? Now, let me preface something before I go too far with this and share it. What I'm going to share with you, it probably won't be very effective on certain platforms. It's probably not going to be very effective on Facebook or email or texting. This is a better technique in a face-to-face conversation, or maybe even speaking over the phone. In my opinion, people tend to listen a little better when they can hear your voice and the tone and the manner in which you are trying to communicate. Email, Facebook, texting, I don't think that works as well for these types of conversations. I'm not saying don't try it, but this is more geared toward that live interaction with people as opposed to some electronic platform. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let me share with how this works. And also, I guess I should make sure to give credit to the author, or the person I learned this from. It was Greg Kukel. He's a Christian author. He also has a website called Stand to Reasons. I believe it's str.org. Really good, lots of resources there if this is something that you want to get a little deeper into. But I think it's important to give credit where credit is due. This is not my technique. This is something I learned from somebody else, and I want to just pass along to you if you're not familiar with it. So now imagine this scenario. You're having a nice, polite conversation with a few friends, and maybe it's someone you don't know is included in this, and somehow the topic of God's existence gets brought up. A person states with maybe some strong convictions that I don't believe God exists. Now, obviously, this isn't a conversation many people like to engage in. It's kind of like politics. It gets emotions boiling, and people tend to get mad at the person rather than the subject matter. But what I'd like to share is how to handle this type of situation. This is one way to handle this type of situation, and to gracefully respond to an atheist or agnostic person. So maybe they say something like this. They say, God doesn't exist. In fact, for me to believe God exists, I would probably have to be delusional. Now that's kind of tough to listen to. The statement is kind of combative. But here's what I would suggest you say. You gently respond, and I can't emphasize gently enough. You gently respond, I believe God exists. In fact, I think I could prove that the belief that God exists is not delusional, and that it's actually quite rational. Now, if you say that in a good tone, in a gentle tone, usually the person is going to be quite interested in what you have to say. Saying this will definitely turn some heads. I don't know about you, but I'm always interested in hearing someone defend a position, especially the position that's related to God's existence. So now that you have their attention and they indicate they want to hear what you have to say, the technique works when you're asking them questions. You see, this is more about them arriving at a logical conclusion than you making them listen to your defense of God. You ask questions, they respond, and it goes kind of quick. You're not trying to trick them. You're just trying to get them to think about the claim they just made that God does not exist. And they may further qualify the statement with something along the lines of only a delusional person or a person who believes in unicorns or the tooth fairy would believe in God. That's something maybe you do as a child, but you grow out of that when you recognize what science has to offer, etc. So before I start confusing everyone, let me try and demonstrate this from start to finish, and then we'll circle back with a few thoughts, or maybe I'll weave some thoughts in there. So the person has made the statement, God doesn't exist, and added some qualifiers with that. And so you would say, can I ask you a few questions? Do you mind? And if they're reasonable, they most likely will say, sure, go ahead, ask me some questions. So the first question is, do things exist? It's not a trick question, but do things exist? Like air, space, time, matter, mathematical problems. Do these things actually exist? Now, more than 98% of the time, the people will probably say they do. Unless they come from a viewpoint that reality is just an illusion, which is a kind of a whole different type of situation or conversation that you could go with. We'll leave that aside for now. Maybe in a follow-up video I can share with how to deal with that response. But they'll probably agree that the things do exist. So the skeptic responds, yes, things exist. And you say, good, we agree. Next question. Question 2, have things always existed? Again, not a trick question. And usually you probably won't get any pushback from this. Most skeptics do believe in the Big Bang theory or the Big Bang model. Many years ago, it was the steady state model, which was the belief that matter has always existed. But scientific discoveries have definitely changed that, which was the belief that matter always existed. But now there was a single point where that Big Bang exploded everything. So most skeptics hold science in a high standing. So I seriously doubt anyone's going to challenge this question, assuming you're having a serious conversation. The answer will probably be no, things have not always existed. And this is where you can say, great, we agree with two things. We agree that things exist and that things have not always existed. And this is good. So the third question would be to ask them, what caused things to exist? See, we both agree things have not always existed, and now that they do exist. So what caused those things to exist? Now, this part can get a little confusing, and you may need to help them get to the answer before they get frustrated with your question. You might want to say something like, well, there's really only two options, right? Either something caused things to exist, or nothing caused things to exist. Did something cause things to exist, or did nothing cause things to exist? You might ask, in your experience, has nothing ever caused something? If something can come from nothing, I mean, why don't we see this happening in other times? Of course, you might want to be careful here, depending on their background. If they have a scientific background, they may try to invoke the quantum theory or with the quantum vacuum. This is the theory that states something can come from nothing. This is a little controversial, but I would simply respond if they do try to invoke the quantum mechanics. But you say that I think the quantum vacuum is something. I don't see the quantum vacuum as a universal negation. I believe that's still something. It's not, nothing to us is nothing. It's likely you won't get into this, but just in case you do, you might want to be prepared to respond to something about that. So you've asked these questions. You've asked, do things exist? They're probably going to say yes, hopefully. 98% of people will say yes. Did things always exist? Most likely they will say no. Big Bang model shows that there was nothing and now there's something. What caused things to exist? And if they're a rational person, they will, and a reasonable person in this conversation, they will probably say something did. Did nothing, not nothing, but something probably caused this. So this is where you ask the skeptic now, getting back to kind of your first statement, is it reasonable or rational to believe something caused things to exist? They're probably going to concede this line of reasoning that you shared. And say, yeah, it seems rational to me to believe that something caused things to exist. And this is where we get to the meat of it all. This is where you have to ask the skeptic, well, what could possibly be this something that caused things to exist? I mean, this something would have to be probably pretty powerful. It would have to be something that wasn't bound by time, space, and matter. I mean, it caused those things to exist. I believe it'd have to probably be timeless and spaceless, immaterial, uncaused, and unimaginably powerful. Now, at this point, the conversation could go a few different ways, or maybe it'll come to an end. But if you can at least get the person to think a little bit, I think you've accomplished a lot. Maybe just put a pebble in their shoe that will annoy them enough to try and process what you shared. You see, it's not about winning an argument. It's all about getting the skeptic to think about their position. I mean, you could call this maybe pre-evangelism. You're trying to stir up the soil so as to remove those obstacles, those obstacles that have prevented them from seriously considering having Jesus as their Lord and Savior. I'd like to leave you with this scripture that really speaks to what we just talked about. It's Colossians chapter 4, verses 5 through 6. It says this. It says, "Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone." I hope this little technique helps you, and I look forward to hearing your responses. And maybe if I've confused you a little bit, I'd love to have a conversation to help you put that puzzle back together if I've confused you. But I thank you, and I look forward to seeing you guys next month when we reopen and we have worship together. So take care, everyone, and God bless.